From the time of our arrival in Aotearoa, Māori have created a unique architectural history. Our structures not only house people, but also our dreams, our fundamental needs, and our histories. So what can we tell about ourselves from these buildings? What do they say to us? It's a question I've asked myself constantly. I'm Ro Hoskins, and as a director of an architectural practice, understanding the stories held within the walls of our buildings has been a lifelong obsession. In this series, we're going to take you on a journey to explore not just our architectural structures, but also the social and cultural histories from which our buildings arise. We'll ask, what is Māori architecture? And celebrate some of our most stunning buildings. Ratana Pa stands in rolling farmland 30 kilometres south of Whanganui. The Pa is the centre of the Ratana faith, one of our most significant religious movements.
The January 25th celebration is one of the main days of the year for the Ratana Church. Every year, thousands gather at Ratana Pa to commemorate the birth of the founder of their religion.
Over the course of a week, dignitaries and politicians join the Ratana faithful to celebrate the birth of a man who's perhaps our most influential religious leader. A man who began a political movement that changed the face of politics in Aotearoa. A man who oversaw the creation of some of the most iconic buildings in Māori architecture. In 1918, a humble Whanganui farmer by the name of Tahupōtiki Weremu Ratana was visited by a series of profound spiritual visions. The visions revealed to Ratana a mission to unite the Māori people under one God and spread the gospel. He then founded a new religion with a unique interpretation of both the Old and New Testament theology, and an equally unique architectural style, a style that has been adopted around the country by his followers. The passion that Ratana inspires lives on among his followers today. And Ratana's ability to draw the crowds from the faithful adherents to the country's leaders is just as strong as when he was alive.
Each year, during the celebrations of January 25th, loyal followers are joined by dignitaries and politicians who recognise the influence of this man and his religion. A religion that was inspired by a series of extraordinary revelations that occurred almost 100 years ago.
On the day of November the 8th, 1918, T.W. Ratana felt as if he were on fire. He went out onto this veranda and began to pray for his son Omeka, who was seriously ill. Ratana began to drift into a deep meditative state as he leaned on the veranda post. A cloud formed above the sea and headed in his direction. The cloud exploded, and from its centre a ray of sunlight beamed down. The faithful believe that at this moment the Holy Spirit came to the prophet. It was revealed to Ratana that the Holy Spirit had come to Aotearoa to declare Māori as the chosen people. The culmination of the mission given to Ratana on the veranda of the Whare Marama is this, the temepara at Ratana Pa. Officially opened in 1928, the temepara was the completion of Ratana's spiritual mission.
Ratana believed that the temepara would be like Ezekiel's temple, so he was very much following a tradition of biblical leaders in that sense and coming straight from the Bible. But I think also he needed a focus for his movement as well, especially that move around 1925 when they were becoming a church, and he wanted a strong focal point. And the building that he created must have just been absolutely amazing to the Mōrehu, his followers. There would have been nothing else like it within the Māori architectural landscape. So it was truly a vision in itself. So it brought the people together, became a focal point, and it had such symbolic resonance with the painted symbols inside, the formalism of it, the bell towers in the front, but still that very strong gable form that runs all the way through Māori architecture, the way the gardens were designed, the way it related to the other buildings on his farm, creating almost like a marae in between. So it dealt with cultural functions, it dealt with the spiritual needs, plus it was emblematic of his movement. It cemented that it had arrived and that this was truly important. And also the way that it was designed talked about his mission very specifically, that people could identify with in terms of the colours and the symbols and the theology, but not enough of a departure from pre-existing Māori architecture with the gable form to be strangely different. It's said that he created a sketch when he was in Japan. He befriended a bishop there, and that bishop, Nakada, was designing or was involved in the design of a Roman Catholic basilica, which has 2 bell towers. And if you have pictures of that building, which was in Nagasaki, and you put it up against the temepara, you can see an immediate similarity. But unfortunately, that building in Japan was at ground zero during the A-bomb attack, and only one of the bell towers survived, but it has been rebuilt since then. So the Japanese Mōrehu relationship was very strong, and the bishop actually arrived for the opening. They had a second opening in 1928 just for the bishop. So we can look at the 2 buildings and compare them and see that they're very similar. But there were so many other quotations in the symbolism based on the Japan trip. You've got that rising sun motif, for example, and there was a coin that was on the pulpit, which was from Japan as well. So the bell towers might have been a quotation of that.
In a decade, Ratana had built his church with thousands of followers.
One of the most distinctive features of the architectural style seen in these great Ratana buildings are the double dome towers. The towers represent a duality which lies at the very foundation of the Ratana church movement.
The 2 towers of the temepara are named Arepa and Omeka, from the Greek words Alpha and Omega, meaning the first and the last. They also represent Te Ture Wairua, Ratana's spiritual quest to bring the Māori people under the one true God, and Te Ture Tangata, Ratana's secular quest to fulfil the promises made to Māori in Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The towers also symbolise Ratana's sons, Te Arepa, the firstborn, and Te Omeka, the younger son. These names adorn every Ratana church. The spread of Ratana was prolific, but nowhere in the country can you see more Ratana churches than in Northland. This iconic 2-tower structure is repeated in many Ratana churches around the country. Although Ratana never insisted on building new churches, the community here in Mangamuka, like many in Northland, wanted their own Ratana-style church.
Our great-grandfather was there at the beginning of Ratana's mission, the Reverend Tāpeta Renata, who was a Methodist Home Minister, and he took Ratana's message back up north. What appealed to them, I think in particular about Ratana, even though he was from the west, he was from the Taranaki region, the Whanganui region, and they were from a completely different place, was his message of change and redevelopment. And the north had suffered right from the start of colonisation, and they were looking for new ideas, new things to do. Tribalism didn't necessarily suit them at the time, the sort of stuff that Ngata was promoting, but messages of healthy living and well-being and spirituality as a way of continuing on. So it wasn't so much an attempt to claim spirituality for economic well-being, but to sort of get your wairua back in a way. And that really appealed to people. And the fact that, he wasn't asking for carved buildings, that people could build with the materials that they had to hand, meant a lot to the people up north.
One of the things, ngā kororo a te māngai, e ngā mōrehu, koe koutou e haere I te tūtū pautapeta mō koutou. Ne? Kei wale koutou ki te pā matua I Ratana pā. Ne? Mōrehu, don't go and start building post offices for your fellas, like meaning whale whakamoimiti. Ne? Hence you might forget the main source of our Timepara Wairua at Ratana. But Mōrehu, being Mōrehu, they just, with joy, first thing they come back, let's build a whale whakamoimiti here and there, up in the north, and throughout, for their love for this māramatanga. Ne?
So they just took the whakaaro from Ratana and went ahead and built.
I think the model was from Ratana, all of whale whakamoimiti similar, near enough to how one of Ratana was built, eh? Maybe just small in a smaller model of it, but actually they try and get it so near enough to the whale whakamoimiti matua at Ratana pā. Ai.
And always with arepa and omeka.
Ai. Ko te arepa me te omeka ko ia te timatanga me te whakautenga, ne? The alpha and omega, the beginning and the end of everything. Everything starts with alpha and omega and finish with arepa and end with omeka, eh? There's always the significance of the movement of the Hahi Ratana. Aye.
All Ratana churches contain the same significant symbols of the Ratana faith. The five-pointed star and the moon are recurring motifs. Unlike traditional Māori buildings, the Mangamuka Church faces the west, just like the temepara at Ratana pā.
A lot of the things are facing the west, all the whare whakamoimiti, ne? Because it was in the west that this māramataka they came, or the Wairua tapu at Ratana and Wanganui in the west coast. Because of the Wairua tapu, the Holy Spirit that came to Ratana from the temepara I Ratana, that all other temepara like this one here, that faces the west, the setting of the sun. The sun is always behind, and you look at it in relation to how the whale whakamoimiti is facing. The sun is behind, the rising of the sun is behind me. The lightning of the māramatanga, that's what's predicted, eh?
Ratana changed the face of religion in this country and the face of politics. And he left an indelible mark on our architecture. But how did this ordinary working farmer come to create a religious and political movement that would grow to have tens of thousands of followers? It was here on his veranda that Ratana experienced a profound set of revelations. Visions that would change his life. And from that day onwards, he discovered he had an unexpected gift. Ratana found that his faith gave him a gift to heal the ill and the disabled. Requests for his divine spiritual healings came from all over the country, and from as far as Australia, England, and the United States.
This is a very unique building for this pā. You see, the architecture of Ratana represented a radical change from the meeting house tradition. And the Whare Māori is the only building in the pā to actually incorporate whakairo into its design. And the contents of the whare are also very unique.
This small carved house at Ratana pā is called the Whare Māori. Thousands of letters seeking Ratana's help are held in this storehouse, along with many other moving reminders of Ratana's healing powers. The archives of the Ratana Church include more than 200,000 letters from people of the time seeking healing. The Whare Māori holds taonga left behind by those who were healed by Ratana. The crutches, wheelchairs and other possessions they no longer needed after being cured. And gifts left in gratitude for their healing. And as the stories of the miracles performed at Ratana pā became widespread, the faith grew.
By the end of 1925, the population of Ratana pā had swelled to over 600 people, with large crowds visiting every day. But for T.W. Ratana, there was more to his mission than just healing the sick, much more. His goal was to fundamentally change the future for all Māori.
The spiritual icons of Ratana were windows through which to look into the kingdom of heaven. Like so many buildings we've visited in this series, these whare are alive with meaning and symbolism. But in other ways, the Ratana style is very different to any other whare karakia we've seen. Not a koru in sight, not a tiki, not a manaia, not a marakiho.
Kia tautarangi Māori e ki tēnei whare, ki runga hoki kia tātou katoa e tawana. Mā te maanga he tautoko mai, ai nei ake nei, ai. Hera.
Beautiful.
Making his holy buildings, Ratana consciously turned his back on the old and embraced an entirely new form of religious symbolism.
So tell us about some of the symbolism on the flag there.
The world map up there, that was his world tours.
Yes.
Places that he went. He went everywhere.
Yes.
Around the world to spread this gospel that he was given. And up there he's standing with the Japanese...
like a samurai.
Yeah. And they swapped cloaks to denote that they've become one person. Two towers of Arapa and Omaka. Arapa meaning the beginning, and Omaka meaning the end, or the last, the beginning and the first, or the ending and the last. And you'll see it on our badges too, on those emblems, the A and the O.
Yes, and the like the heart shape around the temepara there is...
Yes, I think that's our heart.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I think that's our heart.
Yeah.
We make it like that.
And the motor car and the plane.
When he came, he had two big kaupapas on his hand, ture wairua, ture tangata, the spiritual and the physical. Well, when he was doing the spiritual work, that's when he was up in the aeroplane. And then since he'd completed it, he climbed down to the car and he went there to go around and complete the rest.
Sure.
Ratana temples are full of this unique fusion of imagery. Ancient symbols like the Ratana emblem with its Old Testament crescent and star. Imagery with great relevance for Ratana's Māori followers, like depictions of the signing of the treaty. And images with direct relevance to Ratana's life, like this depiction of the Whare Marama, the place where Ratana had his life-changing visions of the Holy Spirit.
The windows here, can you tell us about the symbolism around the three, or the diamond and the two triangles?
Yes, I think the diamond representing the tama a te matuora,
Sure.
the son of God. Yeah. The red representing the wairua tapu, and the blue representing the matua, or the father.
So it's matua, tama, wairua, tapu, again.
Yeah, yes.
The architectural symbolism of Ratana's religion was a definite departure from what had gone before. Whakairo and traditional symbols were rejected. In Ratana's temples, ancient Old Testament symbolism was fused with much more modern imagery, like the planes and cars on the mural here at Raitihi.
You won't find any whakairo necessarily or kōwhaiwhai work in there, so there was a resistance against that. And I guess you could say at the time Ratana's mission was to defeat tohungaism, as he called it, the role of the tohunga, and those arts he associated and some of his followers associated with that type of spirituality. But what they did use, and which you could say they appropriated from other Māori movements that preceded them, other prophetic movements, were celestial symbols. Those had appeared on Paimārene flags in the mid-19th century, had been continued by the kingitanga, repeated again by Ruakenana at Mangapohatu on Hiona. So by the stage it was built, there was 70-odd years of the use of that type of symbolism by Māori people to denote certain things. And he was using that when he created the Whetū Marama, the star moon symbol, and other celestial signs that you see painted on the buildings.
To understand Ratana's move away from earlier Māori symbolism, we need to understand the context of the time. Ratana rose to prominence in a period of crisis for Māori. Introduced diseases and the toll of warfare had contributed to the Māori population plunging to less than a quarter of pre-European numbers. Despite the signing of the treaty decades earlier, more than 80% of Māori land was no longer in Māori hands. Ratana was confronted with the issue, how to save a race at the crossroads. For Ratana, the answer lay in moving away from tribalism, turning away from symbols and traditions that he saw as being part of a tohunga past. Ratana's vision was to unify all Māori, using a symbolic system that reached back to the Old Testament theology, moving away from tribalism towards a united pan-tribal Māori culture. And even in the structure of his temples, Ratana was uniting the old and new to produce something unique. The Raitihi Ratana Church began as an old Methodist church and later added the Arepa and Omeka towers. The congregation that converted from Methodist to Ratana were able to do so without having to change address. Ratana had created a new religious architecture.
And the way he took his message out to the people was also very unique.
Ratana travelled the length and breadth of Aotearoa with a contingent of young bands promoting his vision, bringing new believers to the flock. He healed the sick and treated the young to an evening of entertainment. Ratana also looked offshore for solutions to the plight of his people. In his travels, he sought to force the government of New Zealand to ratify the Treaty of Waitangi through international law. Ratana's boundless energy was compelling. He filled his pa and his churches with converts who were convinced that he was the māngai, the mouthpiece of God. He'd created his most significant building, a unique religious monument on a scale rarely seen in this country.
But the culmination of Ratana's spiritual mission would be marked by personal tragedy and loss.
Soon after the great temepara was completed, tragically, Ratana's beloved son Arepa died. Ratana faithful believe there's a connection between the events, that Arepa was the sacrifice for the completion of his father's Te Ture Wairua mission. In 10 years, T.W. Ratana had changed the face of Māori religion and Māori architecture. And he was about to do the same for Māori in the world of politics. By 1928, Tahupōtiki Wirumu Ratana had created the temepara, completing the spiritual mission he had been given in the visitation from the Holy Spirit. Now Ratana turned his attention to his secular quest, politics. As his mission changed, so did the architecture.
This is Manuao at Ratana Pā. Where the temepara was created as the focus of spirituality, Manuao is the centre of Ratana politics.
The design of Manuao features an inclusive pan-tribal vision. 7 of the waka that landed in Aotearoa are joined here by Cook's Endeavour and Tasman's ship, the Hames Kerik. The facade combining 4 existing houses with numerous new buildings. The blending of influences reflects Ratana's belief that Māori would need to gain influence in the world of the Pākehā if our message was to be heard.
The Manuao has the 7 waka on it, plus it has the Hemskirk and Endeavour as well. And Ratana believed that the Manuao in particular was almost like Noah's Ark. It was a place that people would rush to and be saved politically as well as spiritually. But apart from the 7 waka, he also had the Hemskirk there and the Endeavour, so there was this idea of saving the Pākehā as well. It was sort of like the secular centre. The temepara painted white, to evoke Christ's purity, the followers said. The Manuao painted green, Ratana's political identity.
And it was here that an alliance with the Labour Party led by Michael Joseph Savage began. The impact of Ratana's entry into politics was immediate. The Ratana Party won its first seat in Parliament in 1932 with Eruera Tirakatini. In 1935, Ratana's eldest son Hami entered Parliament. And in 1943, 4 years after Ratana's death, all 4 Māori seats were in the hands of Ratana-aligned politicians. For the next 20 years, most Māori Labour candidates were also ministers in the Ratana Church. The political legacy left by T.W. Ratana had become as strong as his religious legacy. It's a legacy that continues and is still celebrated by Ratana followers today. Ratana's religious mission had been accomplished within a decade, and his political mission had taken the same length of time. The Māngai himself died on the 18th of September 1939. The responsibility of continuing his spiritual and material works was passed on to his eldest son, Tokoru, and others of his family.
Tahu Pōtiki Wiremu Ratana left us many gifts: a religion, a political movement, and a voice in the halls of power. But he also left us the gift of a unique and visionary architecture.
An architecture which speaks of empowerment and vision for the followers of Ratana and for all Māori.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.